What's going on, guys? Today we're going over some of the details from chapter 285 of My Hero Academia. The official chapter has now been released and it's cleared a lot of things up that weren't entirely clear from these spoilers. For example, Bakugo's chances of survival and also how All For One has seemingly stolen Shigaraki's body. There was also one moment that seemed to have been an error from Horikoshi, although you guys let me know your opinions on that when we get to it. Okay, so the first thing I need to clear up about this chapter is a common misconception about the state of Deku's arms. From the comments on my spoiler review, I noticed that some people thought that Eri had totally healed Deku's arms of all injuries way back in the Obito arc, but that is just not the case. She didn't fix any long-lasting problems that came from his battle with Muscular. This is why chapter 285 opens with the flashback of Deku being warned that he could lose the use of his arms if he keeps getting injured. Like, Horikoshi wouldn't put that in there if it was completely pointless, if Deku was healed. So clearly his injuries are still there. Despite that, he does not hold back, and I need you guys to appreciate what I'm about to say. Deku and Shigaraki are super high in the sky right now, like really high. Yet the blowback from Midoriya's punches was enough to cause this level of ridiculous damage on the ground below. I don't know what's more impressive, the fact that Deku can actually do this, or the fact that Shigaraki can take all of this and not die. By this point, Deku has given Shigaraki 4 100% smashes in quick succession, and down on the ground you can see Manuel is coming to terms with the realization that a first year student could probably beat him up. As I explained in my spoiler review, Bakugo jets off into the sky with Endeavor and Shoto by his side, and what we now learn from the official translations is that whilst Rocklock was worried for the students, he then thinks to himself that he's acknowledged them as heroes and trusts them to do the job correctly. During the flashback scenes that follow this moment, we get a look back to episode 1 when Bakugo brutally mocked Deku in front of the entire class for being quirkless. I think potentially one of the reasons we are seeing this flashback in particular is because by the end of these events that are happening, Bakugo himself may be quirkless. I'm not saying it's going to happen 100% or anything, but by the end of this video, you'll see what I'm thinking. The scene then flashes back even further to a moment we've never seen before. In these panels, we see a really young Deku and Bakugo watching All Might on the TV as he saves a civilian from a monster. This is the moment that I think potentially could have been a mistake from Horikoshi, but let me know what you guys think. When we look at All Might's shoulders, there is clearly smoke coming from them, which of course is what usually happens when he's at the limit of holding his muscle form. From our understanding, All Might was in good shape up until his battle with All For One, which was 5 years before the first episode of the series. It was only after that moment that his health deteriorated, and this was best demonstrated by this graph that we saw in the first My Hero Academia movie. And given the timelines here, I mean, look how young Deku and Bakugo are. This clearly wasn't 5 years ago, it was clearly way before that, which means that All Might should have been perfectly healthy. We all know the connotations with All Might and smoke, like Horikoshi has basically established that since day one. So I think it just may have been a mistake, but let me know. Following this, we get a cool combination of the past and the present in which Bakugo looks up at Deku fighting Shigaraki and remembers his words way back in chapter 8 in which Midoriya said that he would no longer be the punching bag Deku, but instead he's the Deku who always does his best. This was a nice touch from Horikoshi and a very cool way of signifying Deku's growth, right? Way back in chapter 8, he was almost, in a sense, he was afraid to face Bakugo, like you can see it in his face. And now he's fighting Shigaraki, who is a million times stronger than Bakugo, and Deku just has no fear. He doesn't care about himself, he's thinking about saving everyone else regardless of what happens to him. Moving on though, the two most interesting aspects of this chapter are located in its final pages. Number 1 is the return of All For One, and number 2 is Bakugo's sacrifice to protect Deku. If you've seen my spoiler review, you'll know that Endeavor grabs Shigaraki and then unleashes his Prominence Burn, but it's at this moment that AFO seemingly swoops in and hijacks Tomura's body. From the leaks that came out on Thursday, this was not clear at all, but now we get the clarification that yeah, AFO is now just in control. Earlier in the chapter, Shigaraki was begging himself almost to find a quirk that could deal with Deku, and it seems that in this moment, AFO has answered that call. It reminds me of when your brother or sister will ask you for help on a game, and then instead of telling them what to do, you just grab the controller and do it yourself. That said, it's unclear exactly how long AFO is about to be in control, because many chapters ago, we saw how his spirit was trying to control Shigaraki in a sense, but Shiggy was able to destroy that vestige, and I thought that was the end of it. The fact that he was able to show Shigaraki so much compassion up until this point, that was surprising. So the idea that it was all a facade and in reality he just wanted a backup body all along, I can believe that. Either way, this new and improved All For One looks absolutely hideous, and whilst I don't know what this speech bubble is meant to say, I imagine it's similar to one of those noises you would hear in The Last of Us. The official translation clarifies that All For One says the words little brother when targeting Deku with forced quirk activation. A similar thing happened a few chapters ago in that AFO doesn't really see One For All as just a quirk, but rather he sees it as the personification of his little brother. In my opinion, there's probably more to the story of All For One and his brother than we've been told about, because, as we know, AFO's brother didn't even really like him to begin with. So what's All For One's obsession with him? Like, why is he so desperate for them to have a reunion? Clearly there must be more to the story. The chapter ends with Bakugo pushing Deku out of the way and sacrificing himself. But now that I've had more time to think about it, I'm even more certain that Bakugo is going to survive. The reason I say that is because the blow that Bakugo took was originally intended for Deku, and naturally All For One wouldn't kill Deku until he could steal One For All first. That means by default that this blow was not meant to be critical, it's not meant to kill someone. So for the time being at least, Bakugo is alive, and next chapter, you know what, the likelihood is that All For One is just going to let Bakugo drop down to the floor in the same way that he did for Endeavor, because he doesn't really care about them, it's all about stealing One For All. Worst case scenario is that All For One pulls Bakugo towards him and steals his quirk in much the same way he intended to do for Deku. If that was to happen, it would of course mean that Bakugo essentially sacrificed his quirk to save Deku, which would be incredibly poetic because, as we all know, Bakugo bullied Deku for being quirkless for so long, so to then lose his own quirk to save Deku, yeah, that's full circle right there. Either way, the fact still remains that Bakugo, Endeavor and Deku are now seriously injured, and it seems that next chapter, Shoto might get the chance to shine because everyone else is super exhausted, super injured, super tired. Shoto is the latest person to join the battlefield, so I would hope that he has enough energy to put up a fight. But anyway, let me know down below, what did you guys think of this chapter, and how high do you rate the chances of Bakugo losing his quirk? Do be sure to subscribe, as I'll be discussing next week's chapter on the channel as well. And until then, peace out.